welcome to Message to Lightworkers podcast, an interview series created to share and connect through our healing work and life path. My name is Bri, aka Santora Kuma, and I'll be your host for today. I will be sharing each guest's information in the info box. I just ask that if you feel inspired and motivated by these stories, that you please share, like, and subscribe so that this channel may grow infinitely to inspire and motivate other people and light workers around the world. I thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this session. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another powerful episode of A Message to Lightworkers. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Josh Tan, and he is a life alchemist supporting career women, business owners, and goddesses. He supports you to eliminate the hidden patterns that block love, success, and giving back to the people you care about by aligning your professional and personal life. Clients experience fulfillment, confidence, and peace of mind. And Josh has an expansive background in corporate engineering, Western psychology, and Eastern mindfulness. He now blends his expertise to empower women and transform lives from lead into gold. And in 2021, Josh will be supporting more socially minded and for benefit entrepreneurs and light workers. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sandora. It's so nice to be here, especially on this very special day.
Yeah, so we have to talk about today because this is not going to be posted today. So let's talk about how special today is.
So today is the winter solstice. It's December 21st. And it's also the grand conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, which are coming conjunct and moving into the sign of Aquarius. These two planets have been running major themes this year of change and transformation, expansion versus restriction. And you can see that especially in the Western world, in America, where we are, with all the crazy movements that happened this year, including the lockdown of the pandemic, which was very constrictive. Then there was all the call for change with the Black Lives Matter movement and even the latest election. So these are real huge archetypes that are happening, and you can see them really perfectly with Saturn and Jupiter in the sky. They were also moving through a lot of different signs, which really corresponded well with the year. And we're moving into the age of Aquarius, which it's actually debated between astrologers whether we're in it or not. But now for sure, we're definitely 100% in it. And this is the sign of free love, brotherhood, humanitarianism. And I think that's a great place for us to be.
Awesome. So how do you, I guess, now that we're kind of speaking on that topic, what do you expect to see change? Like, do you have an expectation or?
I think we do. I guess it'd be more of a dream that more people stand up for what they believe in and what's right. And we move to a inclusive society. And I don't mean inclusive like, let's include all the marginalized groups. Yes, let's do that. And that's really important. But what I mean is like looking at each other as part of each other rather than as individual aspects. I think that individual look has caused a lot of turmoil from the systems we have now. Kind of like the othering aspect has really hurt us in the long run.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because it's difficult. That's a tough thing to do. Like, I know that we are all light workers, but it's like something that I think that we need to really, just as humanity, embrace like differences. And I want to bring it to, like you said, elections, like even election, like during election time, like even right now, it's still December. So like on the timeline, you'll still see each side's kind of still making their last little rebuttals or their last arguments. And just looking at my timeline alone, I'm like, wow, I have a really good blend here of both sides supporting each other. I wonder how many other people have friends that are on both sides and then can actually be friends or have a conversation. I think that's really important. But kind of want to make a segue in here to how does this relate to like what you do? You talk about life alchemy. What does that mean?
Thanks, great question. So alchemy is transformation. And in other words, I'm a transformational coach. And with transformation, there's a lot of growth, a lot of change, and a lot of difficulty, challenges, even some would say pain. So I help women primarily right now get through the blocks, the patterns, the habits that are keeping them stuck. And really, that transformational experience or that alchemical experience, uh, releasing the old patterns. First off, we have to shine light to them, bring awareness to them. Where do they come from? What are they doing? How are they actually serving us in the moment? Because all of our patterns serve us until we don't want them anymore, or until we want something new. And when we want that new that new career, that new level of impact, that new love in our life, we have to look at the patterns we've been carrying up to that point. If you've been dating people under your league per se, and you're expecting something, magical, your prince knight in shining armor to show up, you can't continue the same patterns going forward. Same thing if you're making career transitions. I'm working with a lot of professionals who are looking for a level up, not necessarily in promotion. I've seen a lot of people looking to make more social impact, and then they have to get through the fear of, what if I fail? What if I'm not enough? What if no one listens to me? What if I can't do it? If I'm not a leader? So that transition, that's the alchemical process, and that's how I'm helping. That's my role in this time, and that's how I'm helping others.
Okay, so I'm just want to make sure I'm understanding and grasping everything that you're saying. So what you're saying is you're kind of the person that's helping understand the pattern and blockages from achieving those things, the things that we want.
That's correct. Yeah.
So I recently read a book about like different about archetypes and stuff, and like how when you're behaving in this pattern, you do kind of attract those things to you. So as you work with different women, like different types of women, and you said specifically business owners, career women, goddesses, what is like a common denominator that you're seeing like repetitively as like a common theme that everyone, or you see a majority of people kind of
I would
battling?
I would say there's two themes. One is the inner child theme, which I'm sure you're really well familiar with. And to anyone listening, no matter how perfect your life was, somewhere along the lines, you adopted some kind of pattern, most likely a limiting belief or like a fear-based pattern that says you can't do it. It's not safe for you to, it's not safe for you to go out on the skinny branches and take risks. You've adopted some kind of pattern like that. That inner child pattern is very common. It can also include like mother and father wounding. We all have, even the absence of a mother or father can cause a significant developmental trauma. So that's the child pattern that we're dealing with. That's one. And then the second pattern I see most often is a masculine feminine balance, masculine feminine polarity, where this is actually goes great with what I said in the beginning of our talk, where we're moving into the age of Aquarius. And a lot of mystics and light workers and healers are also saying we're moving into feminine energies. Up until this point, especially in the 20th century, we saw like a rise of what people call the toxic masculine, right? This very, very aggressive, very aggro, very consumerist masculine energy that push, 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 get things done, get shit done. And we have a lot to show for it in the material world. When women wanted to take their rightful place at the table in business, in organizations, they came about it through a masculine leaning way. It's this woman who's very, very driven, very direct, very warrior like to combat the men in the office, So the second pattern I'm seeing is leaning into that softer, quote unquote, softer side, that feminine aspect, that intuitive, emotional, sit back, receive aspect that a lot of women I work with who are successful, they don't know how to do that because they're just so used to being in the driver's seat all the time. They're so used to being looked at in a place of authority or having to call the shots that they don't know how to like lean back into that intuitive space.
So there's lots of talk about, both male and female have, feminine and masculine polarity. Are you saying that we've been kind of like overcompensating in the masculine to where the feminine is kind of like so far? Or are you saying like women should, or women, a lot of women that you're seeing that are successful career women are just kind of blocked off from femininity because we've been kind of conditioned to work in our masculine so much?
I think the second way you said that is closer to it. Yeah, just been the workplace is a masculine dominated place. It's a logical place. It's science, numbers, facts, finances. You know, sort of fit in that world. Women, modern women, millennial women had to adopt a masculine, logical way of thinking, and that just leaves it not necessarily blocked off, but kind of like underutilized, the two sides.
What's the danger in over masculinity? You said toxic masculinity, but I just want to make it clear because we have listeners from like all levels of like different backgrounds and understanding. So, what's the toxicity of that, of being over masculine, just as a society, and then also in women, because you work specifically with women? So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So masculinity, and I use the word toxic with air quotes because you can't actually be toxic. You could just lean too far to one side. It's more of an imbalance. But toxic masculinity is really what they call it in pop culture. Toxic masculinity is really, misogyny. So the dangers of an overly masculine drive: number one, burnout, not being able to resource yourself, not being able to get like nutrition, not nourishment, replenishment, rest and relaxation. That's one. Number two, extreme levels of independence, or even like lonerism, or being a lone wolf. The masculine principle is really like a direct like line. It's motion, so it's pushing people away so you can get what you need done. That's a very common overly masculine principle. And then the third is not being in touch with your emotions. So masculine being in the logical mind, what makes sense on paper, what's the best decision for my career, or what's the best decision for my love life. If you're trying to decide that with your mind, that might not be the best way to go about it. So this overly logical, overly analytical, linear thinking, really blocking off from emotions, which will cause disparage in your life, because although we're using our minds primarily, we're a mental culture, we're living for emotions. Nobody's living to think a lot. Nobody's living to be like, oh, I love having my mind full of complex problems and too many thoughts. People want to live to be happy. They want to live to laugh. They want to live to be in love, to be in passion. That's what we're living for. So we're living for emotions, but we're stuck in the mind. And that's being stuck in the mind is an overly masculine problem.
Okay. So let's shift over now to the feminine. Tell us what this world looks like, because it's so unknown right now, right? Because we're moving right now into that new space. So tell us, what is that femininity kind of balance? Actually, let's talk about, if you don't mind, what the femininity is and what that would look like, and then what it, even if that was, I don't know if you could call it toxic femininity. If there's a toxic masculinity, I'm sure there's a quote unquote toxic femininity, right? And then what that would look like being balanced.
Sure, that's a great question as well. Thank you for that. So the feminine aspect, it's the mirror image of the masculine aspect. I won't say it's the opposite, but it's like the mirror image, where the masculine aspect is extremely linear. The feminine aspect is very circular. It's very inclusive. It's very much community oriented. It's very much like looking at all aspects at the same time. It also shows up in a woman's biology, the way her eyes look in periphery versus a man has longer sight distance. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is it's the intuitive emotional space versus the logical space. So this is where things don't make uh, necessarily cognitive sense, but they emotionally make sense, or they intuitively make sense from like a higher power, or from a deep inner knowing that this is the right choice. The feminine aspect also is the receiving end of things. So in the masculine world, with that linear motion, with that get it for yourself, kind of like push towards it, the feminine aspect is allowing things to be present and to kind of manifest in your field, to come to you rather than to go out and get it. So I'd say those three: intuition, emotion, circular being, and receiving is the main principles. To go along with your question, what does that look like in the future? Wow. That's a great question. But I would say it would be tying back to a more inclusive society, and also a where we really make decisions for what's best on the whole versus what's best at the moment or what's best for progress. I would say would probably be the biggest telltale signs of that feminine movement. It's still to be said or still to be seen because we haven't experienced it at this point in time.
My question was now too is what would it look like if you were like if there was like too much like an imbalance of too much femininity? Would that be kind of like you're not doing anything, you're just kind of like waiting for things to happen? Like what is that, what would that look like? Do you
That's partially correct. Yeah, it's definitely a not doing anything. Indecision is a big marker of not being able to do not being able to do anything. If you're overly in the feminine, you're kind of like you can think of it as like too watery, not really making any motion. So that's one, not being able to decide. Being a people pleaser would be two. I guess what we're saying, toxic feminine, being a people pleaser, which is seen a lot with women giving up their boundaries, um, with the pressure to be like a mother and a working woman and a wife. They typically give and give and give without giving to themselves first. So that would definitely be like a quote unquote toxic or an imbalanced feminine aspect. And thirdly would be overly emotional, like overly emotional to the point where it's chaotic. Emotions are great, but you can't let your emotions run your life. You can't let emotions run the show because just as much as we're not our minds, we're not our emotions either. So just because you feel a certain way, you might be having a bad day, you might be going through a mood swing, doesn't mean you have to act from that place. And that ties into how it all got labeled as bad because we can't have those running around, those emotional women running around. We can't have that.
the argument of you can't have a woman in office because she'll get mad then press the war button.
Yeah, the big red button, do not push.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so now we have the understanding of imbalance of too much masculinity, and then we have the imbalance of maybe too much femininity. What does this look like when someone is balanced, when
When
someone
you're
has a nice understanding of both feminine and masculine, how to use them to their own benefit, their own health?
That's what we call integration, the inner union. So every single person is both masculine and feminine, whether you're man, woman, some another gender, transgender, you're both masculine and feminine. Now, the thing about that is you have one where you typically lean to. I typically lean towards the masculine side. I typically lean towards logic and getting stuff done and more of like a push and like drive, right? The balance is not necessarily having it at 50-50, but being able to move between which one serves you in the moment. Being able to move into, okay, I really need to push forward and I really need to recharge. Push forward and recharge. I really need to think for my own and have my own boundaries. Oh, I really need to think for the greater group, my family or my relationship. So that's really what the balance looks like, being able to move between the two at any time. And then to serve yourself with that is knowing I'm I'm too alone. For example, I'm too alone, masculine trait. I'm too alone, I'm by myself, or I'm too much in my mind. It's a better example. Too much in my mind. I'm not feeling enough. I'm denying my feelings of fear and sadness. I'm not looking at what I'm ashamed of or what I'm guilty of or anything like that. So I'm in the mind trying to rationalize everything. So to use these energies to yourself is again a transformation, an alchemy to move into that other energy, that other way of being. And it is uncomfortable, but to be able to go into that and learn the lessons and then move back into either or.
I love that. I love that analogy of the scale. It's really good imagery. Love that. So, and if you could, I guess, make any suggestions for books, and what books would that be and why?
I remember the first book I read that really lit me up and really like shook my world in this genre was Conversations by God. or Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. It's the first book that ever made me cry. And the story of the book is a man, Neil Donald Walsh, the writer, he is like so fed up with his life. He was doing all the right things. He had all this good karma, and but he didn't have anything going his way. And he was so frustrated. He was broke, and like he was getting a divorce, and they were kicking him out of his house. And he just sat down one day. He was so frustrated, and he just started writing a letter to God on like a on notepad. And then as he's writing, he's frustrated, he's scribbling, he's cursing God and writing all these demands. And then after he runs his mind out, the pen keeps moving, and he's like auto transcribing words coming from a higher power. And he continues this process for, I forget how long, but he continues this process daily, asking more questions and getting more answers. And within that book, really connected, if you're studying this stuff, it's hard to sometimes draw connections. At least for me in the beginning, it was hard to draw connections between like a metaphysical study and like a practical study, and like what is spirituality and what is religion. So it really connected a lot of dots for me and really built a nice piece of the foundation. So Conversations with God.
I love that. I actually have a personal experience with that, like getting so frustrated and like, I'm not leaving here, and like having one of those moments of like, wait, like after you get all of that emotion out, you have like a moment of just like receiving, you're just receiving. So I think that's really, really powerful. Um, Going through this whole journey, you obviously spent time, you've obviously spent money. What was the best investment that you've ever made with all of this?
The best investment I ever made was getting a one-on-one coach, an intuitive business coach. And this was when I was starting my own business as an entrepreneur and a coach. And she, with the intuitive aspect, she helped me really get into my intuition and learn my own energy and how to move my own energy and how to use my extra senses.
Mm-hmm.
So that was extremely helpful. I think that's one of the best investments and decisions I've ever made. And that came with a lot of fun, like shadow work and integration and all those great things.
Yeah. Nice. I bet you it helps too with getting deeper too, with like just when you get deep and you find, I guess what I find is when you get deep, you can't help but want other people to feel the same, like champion, like winner. What event took place that had the biggest impact on your spiritual journey, and what did you learn?
Hmm. What event took place that had the biggest impact? There's a number of events uh, towards, I would say there was this one time that I had been meditating for a couple of years, like 2 or 3 years, and I was using apps on my phone, my smartphone. And I was learning how to breathe and like all these things, and I was learning to calm my mind, and I was like, okay, this is helpful. They proved it. They put a monk in an MRI machine, and they showed his brain is healthier because he meditates. I'm like, okay, I'm meditating. And a huge impactful moment was going to see one of my mentors. I'll consider him a guru. He was a Buddhist monk for 21 years. His name is Thupten Punsak. If you're hearing this, I love you. And so I went to his meditation class at a Dharma center. And that meditation was the deepest I've ever been, or one of the deepest times, especially in the beginning, where he guided us into this meditation. He uses visual of getting on a boat in your mind, and like your mind being a vessel going down this stream. And I just remember feeling the dissolving of my body, that I could only feel like my brain. And then he prompted us to feel what our minds felt like. And at that point, I was like, this is a whole other level. I've never experienced anything like this. I didn't know this was what real meditation was like. I didn't know this is what the mystics do and the yogis do. I had no idea. And so when I found that there was that level of depth and that ability to get into the subtle body and the subtle energies and the subtle realms, I believed in so much more after that.
You got you hooked on it.
Got me hooked. That first meditation.
I love that. And what point did you know it was time for you to like change your path and just kind of go full force in your calling? This is a big one because I feel for like a lot of people, there's like a specific moment where it's just like you're kind of like on your knees and you're just like, I need to do this. Like I've got to do this. Like there's just like that moment. Did you have one of those moments or
I did.
what moment was that for you?
I did have that moment. I was a corporate engineer for 10 years, and I'm like a very logical numbers math and never really fit in. Never had a friend or an office mate who could talk about meditation or like spirituality. So that was a long time of feeling like something was disconnected. Like, what am I doing here? This isn't right. I got to change at some point in time. And my towards the tail end of my engineering career, I was getting very frustrated. I was very frustrated with my boss and the work conditions and the amount of work I had to do and like my hours and everything. It's getting very frustrated. And my emotions must have been like rocket fuel to my manifestations at that time. Because I was just like so frustrated. And I remember a it was in November, and a pipe outside running to like a major piece of equipment had frozen overnight and then burst in the morning. And like this major equipment, like if it went down, it meant like catastrophe, like human danger. There could have been an explosion, like all this stuff. And I was super stressed trying to fix it. And I was the only person who was trying to fix it. I was like totally, again, isolated because of different conditions. And I was so frustrated. And I finished the job, came down, and I remember saying, like, this time next year, I'm leaving this effing job to like my one friend. A week later, I actually got let go because I had been so frustrated for so long. They could see my performance was slipping and all this stuff. So a week later, they let me go, and that was a sign, like, okay, like boom, you got what you asked for, much faster than you expected. So that's when I was like, that's a sign from the universe. I'm gonna listen. I've been asking for it for a couple of years, and then I demanded it last week. So okay, let's do it.
That's funny. What is I guess that's funny because that emotion, like you said, is power. It's energy. You just put it out there and boom, you get it right back. That's like instant like answer to your call. But what is one big lie that you lived by in the past or that maybe you're still overcoming right now? Like that you just overcame or maybe you're attempting to overcome now?
Sure. Big lie I was not that I was living and mostly overcome to this point in time is not being authentic. Not being authentic with who I am, what I stand for, what I believe in, and expressing my emotions. And this showed up as wearing a facade all the time, wearing like a I'm happy facade, or I'm professional facade, or you can't mess with me because I meditate facade. And then on the other side, it's like, oh, I'm wearing like I'm fun and like playful, or like I like to go to parties, or like all this other stuff. And it was everywhere in my life. It was with my family, it was my friends, it was in my romantic relationships, in my sex life. Like it was just everywhere. And so that was a big one, coming clean and having to cough up like how I really felt about people, how I really felt about things, how I really felt about myself. And now that's 90-95% taken care of, I have much more ability to communicate effectively and powerfully, being able to influence people, being able to share with people, being able to de-escalate problems, being able to understand what people are thinking, what they're feeling, so I can help them. So I'd say it's mostly overcome. Of course, like there's always those times where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should say this, or I don't know if I should do this, you know.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good one. I like that one because I think we all have had that phase in our life where, and especially when we're coming out of youth and childhood into adulthood, and we kind of have to make that decision on, do we want to continue being that child pleasing parent, pleasing the world, or do we want to come and become our own person? And it's so interesting because you said really something important is it allowed you to be more authentic and more real, when all along we were using that mask to pretend to be more authentic or like more real with this other person. Like, let me show this person that I'm real, that I'm authentic. I think that's really strange how like that works.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't work. If you're with anyone, or if you're hanging out with someone or with anyone or working with someone where you feel like you're watching what you say, walking on eggshells, where you're editing what you're speaking, that's the first place to look. And really, you need to look at yourself first.
Love that tip. What would you tell a struggling light worker to remember as they are attempting to follow their path?
I will tell you to remember to trust yourself. Huge lesson. Trust yourself. You asked for this. I know it's hard. I know it's scary. I promise it gets better on the other side. I promise you're being taken care of. I promise there's more struggles. So trust yourself. Trust the process is big. Um, you're not alone. Definitely, you're not alone. And invest. Like, if you really want to take this seriously, yes, do invest in coaching, mastermind, a group, mentor, go get Reiki training, go get your yoga certification, whatever. And also, one more, I have a lot to say. One more is that as you do this and you take this on seriously, we still live in a 3D matrix. We still live in these confines of society. So be sure to take care of yourself and progress yourself the way that's needed so that you can serve a bigger piece of the pie going forward, going forward, going forward.
Perfect. And if you could assign one I am affirmation to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
I am. I am love. I am connected. Yeah, I want to say that's it. I am love. I am connected.
I am love. I am connected. I feel good even saying that. Josh, it was a pleasure having you on. You had great, great tips and wisdom. And I just want to thank you for sharing your story, for sharing your insight, and just being here with us today.
Thank you, Sandora. It's been a pleasure. And until next time.